So how can I say 100%? Well, it all depends on our definitions, really, and simple logic. Definitions, by the way, that are well established and universally accepted. We can actually debunk the existence of the commonly believed in Abrahamic God by a priori examination. So before we begin, what exactly are we examining? Here I refer to the common conception of God as omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, transcendent. There are other characteristics too, but I think just these 5 will far and away be enough to a priori debunk the idea, and just a couple of those at that as well. You probably already see some contradictions here if you're thinking about it anyway, so the 2nd and 5th characteristics don't make any logical sense. God can't be everywhere and in all places, which implies it's in the material world, so it interacts, it reacts, it acts within the universe, yet be outside of the same system. Doesn't make any sense, does it? It's no good falling back on some magical explanation either. This is a simple matter of logic. A light can't be both on and off simultaneously. A woman can't be both pregnant and not pregnant simultaneously. They're exclusive propositions, aren't they? God cannot be both fully part of and fully not part of the universe at the same time. So you're looking at God's other common characteristic of immanent. So he's immanent. He's fully within the universe, and yet somehow it's transcendent as well. He's fully outside of and independent of the universe. The usual reaction of believers is to state that God is mysterious and we just can't understand the contradiction. But that's not an argument. It just isn't. There are possibilities. God is either transcendent or omnipresent, assuming it exists at all. If God is omnipresent, then it resides within the universe. If not, it effectively doesn't exist. Omnipresence, by definition, places God within the material universe, so that it exists as part of it, not outside of it, and thus the creator of it. Given the universally known evidence we have that the current expansion of the universe began some 13.8 billion years ago from a singularity, we must logically assume God too came into being at that point, if it exists, if it's within the universe. Again, that's the definition of existence that most people inherently have. It's not even questioned usually. Again, this is hardly controversial. There's nothing we observe or can even conceive can be both existent and non-existent. God as the creator of the universe makes no sense if God is part of and defined as a thing that can only exist within the universe. So I, for example, obviously didn't cause myself or create myself. A long chain of events caused me going back to the initial expansion and perhaps beyond, who knows. What is certain is that I had no hand in my own creation, because that makes no sense, does it? This has wider implications for the 3rd characteristic, as how can an entity be all-powerful given there are things outside of its power? It doesn't make sense. Logically, God did not create that which it is a part of. We know that the universe is governed by the rule of cause and effect. To deny that God is subject to this is to suspend our quest for truth, given we must either say that the entity is eternal, or that it came from nothing. Both would suggest no cause. Yet if God had this origin, then why does nothing else? Why don't other things pop into existence? Indeed, why couldn't you suggest, as I have in previous videos on the subject, my argument for the universe's necessities? Why couldn't the universe itself come from nothing? And by the way, that's a much more valid explanation, because we know the universe exists. It's a much more solid foundation to create an argument for something's necessary existence from. The fact that we can feel, touch, interact as we are now. The universe exists. So we can say with far more confidence and probability that the universe itself as a system necessarily exists than God, but that's by the by. So anyway, if we drop the omnipresent tag, things don't get much better, as now by definition God does not exist. So if it's not omnipresent, and by the way, I don't think most religious people who believe in this conception of God with all of these traits would accept that we drop the omnipresence thing. But if we do drop the tag somehow and they accept it, or a lot of people accept it, then by definition God doesn't exist. If it's transcendent, there's no real debate here. If being transcendent means to be wholly separate and outside of the universe, then that which is so has no dimension, time or cause or physical matter or energy, since to exist is to manifest within the universe itself. That is, to have dimensions, time and a cause, etc. That which has none of these simply does not exist. So I like to think of it this way, cheeky little analogy. If you look at your screen and I say now that I have a pink budgerigar nesting on the top of my head, he's just right there. You might think I've gone a bit balmy and say reasonably enough, I can't see it. If I say, well, it's an invisible pink budgerigar, but it's there, I'm stroking its belly right now. You move to touch it as well, if you were here, but feel nothing, just air. You urge me to get it to whistle, like, but it doesn't. I refuse. Say, oh, I'm not going to get it to whistle because it's a shy, invisible pink budgerigar, you know. If at the end of it all I insist it's there, but it's an invisible, immaterial, mute, pink budgerigar, then you and anyone else would be entirely within their rights, as thinking individuals, to question its existence on top of my head. Simply, is it there? Is it a ghost of a budgerigar? But you'd be within your rights to question that. If the bird has no physical height, width, length, or any other physical trait or effect on us, then it's highly likely, bordering uncertain, that the pink budgerigar exists only in my imagination. So the analogy is clear, isn't it? So a transcendent God implodes as a concept outside of the mind. Similarly, we can conceive of other things like the pink budgerigar or square circles, but these have no place in the actual physical world of existent things either. They're just concepts within grey matter. Notice that none of this requires me or you to leave our seats. This is all a priori and valid. We could even put some of these points into syllogistic form, so let's just do one. So premise 1, existence implies something within the universe. Premise 2, God is transcendent. Conclusion, therefore God, by definition, does not exist. So transcendence is to be wholly independent of and removed from the material universe, a trait commonly attributed to God. So this is a solid deductive argument. Premise 1's pretty uncontroversial. Anecdotal and scientific data would suggest to exist is to, have dimension, a cause, and affect other things, as well as be subject to time, entropy, etc. Premise 2 is similarly valid, as that's what believers say of God. We just have to take them at their word. So yes, I'm aware that God is supposedly immanent too, somehow simultaneously, that it's entirely within the universe, but God and everything else is not beyond logic, and something cannot be both black and white simultaneously. If we drop the immanence tag, then God effectively doesn't exist again. If we accept it, then we must logically drop the transcendence tag. They're exclusive, aren't they? They're exclusive concepts. And we must also accept God is part of and within the universe, and thus did not create it, and is not omnipotent either. So that's a big blow to the general description of it, isn't it? Both premises are valid and sound, so the conclusion necessarily follows. It's a deductive argument. So I think we've explored enough in this first crack on why God doesn't exist. It's just a short one today. It doesn't exist logically, and this can easily be demonstrated a priori. I'll be doing more videos on God and the philosophy of religion, so if you found value in this one, think about dropping a like and subscribing, and I'll see you soon. This is Adam, signing off.